welcome. This is a tribute to really the many of you who have been involved in the success of the NCRC. Although David Cantor was just telling me that we're just around the corner having a new name, not really. That when he started, this NCRC was a placeholder, but now it's world-renowned as a result of the great efforts of many of you. So let me just ask you, how many of you were here in early 2007 when the discussions began? Quite a few. I was not here, obviously, and I have to tell you, you have my total admiration, because I like taking big risks, but boy, was this a big risk. And I love accomplishment, and it is so impressive what is here today, not even knowing what was here before. So I have a few comments, but first I want to give you a welcome from Martin Filbert, our provost. I was walking around, my phone rang, and it was this, and I said, Martin? And then I realized it was a FaceTime call, and he was, there's a term for it, but he had mistakenly FaceTimed me from, he said, an hour and a half south of Cancun. So I don't know exactly where that is, but when I told him where he was, he said, well, tell everyone my congratulations. So I'm extending that. So if you don't know the history as I understand it was in 1960 that Park Davis moved its research facility from Detroit to this location, or near this location, maybe this location. Warner Lambert acquired Park Davis in 1970, and then Pfizer in 2000. And over those years, up till 2007, that was some of the halcyon days of drug development and drug advancement and new tools, and this had to have been a hop in place. As I said, I wasn't here. David was here, of course, and a lot of excitement, not the least of which was, I think, one of the best selling, and actually, as a cardiologist, one of the greatest life-saving drugs that has come out of pharma, which was Lipitor, or atorvastatin, a statin. And so over those years, the facility grew and grew and grew, and when Pfizer announced that they were going to leave this location, as I have some notes that were written for me, but as I understand it, there's a lot of conundrum about that, because they would have liked to sell it, but big time, but there weren't many offers right then. However, for the University of Michigan and for the forward-thinking leaders at the time, it was a unique opportunity. And I think looking at it back now in 2019, this opportunity is one that I think so many academic medical centers are envious of, because how often do you have a chance to acquire a facility like this, of this size and this stature, for the amount of money that was paid at the time, and to think that the medical school and the health system put together the vast majority of those funds is truly an incredible thing. Now, that's buying the facility. There was a lot of work that had to be done, and a lot of work that has been done. And today, as you walk around, and some of you took the tours, as you walk around the facilities, these are beautiful facilities, state-of-the-art facilities that have been updated, and the very last buildings will be complete, I think, next summer. And if you look at the research programs here, it's been a phenomenal opportunity to bring together investigators in a way that is really hard to do, and bring together multidisciplinary efforts at research, I think epitomized by the biointerfaces, IHPI, and many other programs. It's also been a great clinical impact. I'm looking at Chuck Parkos, and so one of my very first Regents meetings, I think I just met Chuck once, and I'm sitting up there and I have no idea what's going on, and Chuck's in the audience. I'm thinking, I wonder what he's in the audience for, and it was the vote of the Regents to undertake the pathology space build out and renovation, which as a non-pathologist, I had a chance to tour, and it is an awesome facility. And if you haven't been there, it allows our investigators to do unique things. It allows our clinical pathologists to develop tests that are now being used all over the place. Also, this is a cool room, very cool room. And I actually, one of the best shots I'd seen is one up here from the overhead shot, and you can really see it's shaped like a football, or David told me also like a Viagra pill. And he has a little story he'll tell you about his potential plan to tile the roof in light blue. So there are lots of stories, and I'm only hearing some of them, but I wish I could tell you more of them. The other thing that I heard was that the Plymouth Road corridor just about dried up and went away, and now it's a vibrant corridor in Ann Arbor. What I can tell you is when we moved here, we bought a small home out in Stonebridge, and it's a really nice home. But as we went through it, that home had been foreclosed on in 2007, 2008, 2009, and that was a tumultuous time. Now there are more employees working here, more people working here than there was working for Pfizer in the entire Ann Arbor area. So it's not just a story of excellence in research and in education. It's a story of it's an economic engine for Ann Arbor and the surrounding area. Final thing I'll say is about this room. Many events are held here. As you probably know, Match Day is held here for the medical school. The university and many others use this as a really unique conference opportunity. I hesitate to say this, but I will say it anyway. And the parking's great here. So, 10 years later after it started, I have only the comment that I admire all of you who started this. I admire all of you who work here. And I think this is truly a unique place, and it's a privilege to be able to have come here and seen all that you've accomplished. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton off to Steve Kunkel, our Interim Chief Scientific Officer, who has comments.
Thank you, Marshall. So before I begin going through some of the slides, actually, I have to rely on slides as my crutch, Marshall. I just, instead of putting it at the end, I'd like to just give a shout out to a lot of people that I worked with 10 years ago to help populate this place, and starting with Matt Comstock, and thank you, Matt. You'll see I pirated a few of your slides. Terry Grebe was here. She played an instrumental role. We had our one of our finance people, Dave Morlock, who played a very important role. Joan Kaiser was involved. And I'd like to give a very special shout out to Jim Williscroft, who was a dean at that time, because Jim was the one that actually put a lot of pressure on a lot of people who said, what would you ever do with all that space out at the old Pfizer site? And he had been a champion for a long time until finally one of the regents asked our upper leadership at the Fleming building, why haven't you guys bought the Pfizer site? And it seemed like after that, in the few weeks following, or maybe days or minutes, there was all this really big interest in acquiring this site. So as you can see from this first slide, we had some really unique opportunity. We had the ability to respond to change. We were really busting at the seams with regard to space on the Hill. We seem to always be busting for space on the Hill. But we had the opportunity to seize an opportunity that probably comes along once in my career, probably once in all of our career, with the ability to pick up another 2 million square feet of space for our research. And what that allowed us to do is start thinking about what the future is going to look like and to securing that future. And for the last 10 years, we've been working on that. This is a slide that I borrowed from Matt, and it gives us an idea of how we, through a lockstep process, had to accommodate research and build buildings, put shovels in the ground, starting from the MSRBs to the Cancer Center, Geriatric Center. We bought the BSRB. And I remember the discussions that if we weren't going to buy Pfizer, Matt and his crew and Dave Morlock actually did a lot of modeling. What would it look like, and how many buildings would we have to build to get to the same space if we would just have purchased the Pfizer site? And as you can see on this slide, starting in about 2009 when we did acquire this, it jump-started us with a huge amount of space that would have taken us another 7 or 8 years to actually occupy, and we probably would only be opening some of those buildings right now today. And if you look around, what we've had the opportunity to do with a huge time saving is to come out here and start populating this place. So in 2009, we had a little bit of a puzzle to put together. We had to basically decide, what do we want to do with this place? And how do we want to populate it? And what research themes should go out here? So we were working on some principles. We had a vision that we wanted to make sure that we would solidify the future of the U of M as a leading research institution, one of the best in the world. We had a mission that if we purchased this site, we could accelerate that research, and we could accelerate all of the missions that we have around our academic medical center. We had a strategy that we wanted to leverage our competitiveness, our core competencies in innovative technologies with targeted scientific themes to populate this site. And we always wanted to make sure that we could keep a track on were we being successful with all sorts of metrics that would look to how were we potentially transforming yesterday's science. What were those benchmarks? What were those metrics that we needed to follow to make sure that we're using this space wisely? So this slide I went back and took, it was written in 2009, as we started to think about the research programming. We really wanted to develop transformative research paradigms, and I'll talk about a couple of those. We wanted to set the tone for the next generation of research, which would be occurring here. We wanted it to be interdisciplinary and translational. We wanted to be cross not just departments in the medical school, but a bit through the schools and colleges across the university. And we wanted to establish platforms that would enable the science to be out here. Platforms on personalized medicine, nanotechnology, actually in energy storage, as we partnered with some of our faculty in the College of Engineering. So we stood up a number of work groups. We had an innovation team, a RAT team, which I was associated with, which was our research assessment team. We had an IT team, a core team, and we actually had a team of what we're going to do with public-private partnerships. We still have a few of those today, and throughout the last 10 years, we've had different industry and commercial partners occupy this. And this went all into our research scientific programming. This was the initial timeline that we worked under, starting with June 16th when we signed the contract, or we signed the closing here. We went to work right away with our research assessment team and our research and programming team to try to decide what do we do, what is our first move out here. And what we landed on was to make a call at a higher level instead of initially having grassroots come in, and we'll talk about the grassroots efforts that landed here. But we wanted to make a call and put some what we called anchor tenants here. Tenants that we thought were going to be clear successes and had an opportunity to come here and a lot of enthusiasm and passion to come here. And what we did was to have the biointerfaces and the research outcomes, which later became IHPI. They were the first two groups that came out here to be populated, and both of those, by any measure of success you could think of, has been incredibly successful with regard to what they're doing. In March of 2010, Bora Pharma established out here. It was one of the, many of you may know, there was an explosion-proof building that they occupied very close to here. David Cantor probably remembers that. And then what we did is we opened an RFP. We had a call for proposals of what we would assess to go out here. And we put a team of experts, scientists from the university, across the university, not just the medical school, to vet those proposals. And what landed with, we put the translation oncology group out here, cardiovascular group out here, and the distributive health technology, along with the biointerfaces and IHPI. So right there we had 5 very key themes to start and jumpstart what is happening right here. We then knew that we had to support those by moving some of the core facilities out here, flow cytometry and some of our sequencing core, and that is now out here and functioning well. And then finally we moved out our, as I mentioned, our DNA sequencing core. And kind of since 2012, we've been working diligently, and I don't want to say the rest is history, but we've done a fair amount of work establishing various groups. And I just want to showcase one that I think really epitomized what we wanted to do and is a real success story. It has to do with the biointerfaces. It now has faculty from a number of different schools and colleges: engineering, pharmacy, dentistry, the medical school. They have 30 different research groups. They have various research themes, all of them being wildly successful. As I mentioned, one of the things that we really pay attention to is benchmarks and metrics. And if you look at just their fiscal year 18 metrics, they're very stellar. But if you go back from when they were launched in 2012, it's really amazing what they've done. And this is just a snapshot of just one of those successful groups. They've had $100 million in expenditures, 350 proposals, 1,000 publications, 100,000 citations. And if you look as an output of that work that's entered into the innovation and entrepreneurial circle, 150 inventions, almost 100 patents, 7 startups have all come out of there. So arguably that a lot of those themes that we invested in 10 years ago have really come to fruition and actually have some international stars amongst them, and they are some of our investigators that we are extremely proud of. So what does NCRC look like today? As has been mentioned, we have 3,300 people out here. I would say in the next year, that will be approaching 4,000 people. Marschall already said this. We have many more people right now than Pfizer actually had when they occupied this site. We have almost 350 faculty members. There are private companies that are out here. We have M-City across the street where the engineering folks are testing autonomous cars. We have 3 major institutes, many centers are out here. So by a number of the criteria that we would set down and the benchmarks that we planned for 10 years ago, they've wildly exceeded my expectation, and they've done extremely well. We're not done. So 10 months from now, we will be opening up building 25 and 20 East. There's room for up to, in the neighborhood of 50 principal investigators in their labs. It's a once in a lifetime, again, opportunity, and it almost takes us back 10 years ago, thinking carefully and strategically and logically, how are we gonna populate building 25 and 20 East? It's an opportunity that I think we have to be careful, we have to be strategic, but it is extremely exciting, again, to build those themes, to move those people out here that would have the ability to transform themselves to become like the next generation of a biointerfaces. And I have at the end there the URL. We're still open for the RFPs. It doesn't close until the first part of September. So if any of you have any ideas of formulating a research group, please search that website. So in closing, we developed a theme that we borrowed from an individual who clearly would have been a Michigan graduate if Michigan would have been around, Michelangelo. That we always thought that the greater danger for us lies not into setting our goals high and falling short, but to set them too low and succeeding. And I think what I can say is that we set high goals and we've met a lot of those high goals. And I think a lot of you who were there at the beginning or have been there since to make this place what it is today. Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to introduce an individual who was there at the beginning with us, who has a rich history of this place, Dr. David Cantor.
Well, thank you very much. Let me first echo some of the comments made by Dr. Runge and Dr. Kunkel, in that the real success of this site comes from the faculty and all of the research, that growth that has occurred here, along with all of the research support groups that enable that research to be done in the animal facilities, in the ILBs and many of the other support groups, as well as the commercial development, tech transfer and business engagement center. I mean, that is the real purpose of this site. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank both the comments that have been made publicly and privately, very, very kind comments about the success of this site. And although they've been made to me as an individual, I know that there are so many people that really deserve the credit far more than I do. And I would like to sort of use my comments to talk a little bit about some of the unsung heroes of this place. I look around and I can see many people from the team that I worked with in the last 8 or 9 years. And I'd like to sort of recognize the original team members. So when I first came, I wasn't here the very first year, but there was a very small group of people making this thing happen. Joan Kaiser, Mary Tresh, Kevin Donovan, Dan Duckworth, Kerry Anderson, Steve Walt, Rob Ruggles, and then arriving with me, Shane Fortune. I then probably should add Preston Smith and Matt Brzezinski, and now suddenly I'm in trouble because I know that this list could go on and on and on, and I'm surely going to get some names that I'm going to miss out. So really, those are the people who I worked with who made an extraordinary amount of things happen. Steve mentioned the original strategic plan. I want to go back and say how profoundly important that first year was. It has taken us 10 years to execute the ideas that were put in place in year one. And I remember Mary Sue Coleman commenting to me a couple of things. First, she did say when I came, I was 2 days into the job, and she grabbed me in the way that she always did, which was the supracondylar grip here from behind, and where she whispered in your ear. And she said, you have a few goals that you must accomplish. One of them is that you must get tech transfer moved here by the end of September. This was mid-July. The second was, she said, don't worry, it is going to take 10 years whether you think it is not, or is or not. And finally, she said something very profound. She said, if at the end of 10 years, the medical school are the only group here, you will have failed. So I think with that, the 10-year commitment to funding was also an incredibly brave and far-sighted decision. And I take, and I really emphasize that Dean Williscroft, all of the department chairs that committed to that, actually made an incredible decision, because it allowed a rational plan to actually be executed. And also, it created a set of constraints that we had a limit to the amount of money that we could spend here. And with that, that actually forced us to make some very tough decisions. One of the real aha moments was that the medical school could not afford to do this on their own, that we had to partner with multiple other people if this was going to happen. Pathology is here for that exact reason. Those were buildings that we did not have the money to renovate and bring online. Just as our attempt to use the manufacturing facility, we really tried very hard. We put a huge effort to try to win a Department of Defense contract, and we came second. But really recognizing that that building had to be used by somebody and letting the provost have it was an example of tough decisions. The other thank you that I have is that the leadership at the time granted us real freedom to operate. There was a very high level of trust. And with that came the ability to act quickly and to do things differently here. I always knew that freedom to operate was going to be a limited time duration. I always knew at some point we would be gathered back into the University of Michigan fold of way of doing things. But during that brief period, there was an opportunity to think things differently. And if you look around the site, there's a lot of things that are both done here and then subsequently have been expanded elsewhere that are not the usual way of doing business. I look around the team. The other thing was that the greater team that ended up forming here was very interesting. This was a self-formed team. Permission was not sought from any of their line managers to become part of the team. It was organizationally fragmented. We did not come together in a line management structure until we hit the president of the university. There were that many people from different structures. But we talked about our common objectives, and with that, every group went back and constructed a set of goals that made sense to a common objective. And it gave us an incredible sense of common purpose. And I do believe that ended up being an important part of the success. It changed the way we interacted. And it changed the way we respected each other and as we bumped into each other each day and ended up doing work. 2 points, these last 2 points. The last one was we decided very early on that quality of life was going to be important, and that we were going to spend an effort to make certain that the elements of a quality of life here came to fruition. So catering was something that we wanted from the beginning. So we didn't have enough people to run the coffee bar to begin with, so we decided we'd give away free coffee. Okay? And setting up decent coffee. But then the catering, I think, has become a real cornerstone. Art. The art program here is actually renowned within the Detroit area. We have had probably way over 60 exhibitions here, and many of them attended by many outsiders. I think we've created something that is both interesting and appreciated by the people who work here. Fitness. I'm pleased we put a fitness center here. I think it energize the health system to put in their own fitness center, and I think that those are things which are important to life. Security, the front desks, the way we communicated, things like landscaping, the transport that we had to link us to the rest of the campus, those were all important quality of life things. So finally, a personal reflection. So I've known highs and lows on this site. I actually stood just right over there in January of 2007 to tell everybody essentially that the unthinkable had happened and that the site would be closing. And in fact, today is really a high as we see this site restored to real vibrancy. This was a collective effort, a true collective effort. Although we tend to credit individuals, I know that this was a team effort. And I've played a small part in the success of this project, and that I personally feel a great sense of accomplishment that the day that I led this site and took it down to zero, that from zero, we've been able to take it back to something that really was almost more than it was at the time when it was a commercial site. So thank you very much indeed, and it's a great opportunity to have been part of this.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Steve, for your fantastic comments, and thank all of you. I have the pleasure to invite you to watch a really beautifully done video. And after that, to convene, I think they put out more food and who knows what else, and to enjoy some camaraderie. Thanks again for all of you for being here today.
The news hit Ann Arbor hard. After decades as a cornerstone of the local economy, a major drug company announced it would close its massive research and development operation in the northeast corner of the city. With a major recession looming, the campus seemed destined to stand empty for years. But behind the scenes, researchers and leaders at the University of Michigan saw an opportunity. What if, they said, U of M could buy the site? What if the university could turn the dozens of buildings and acres of land into a hub for new kinds of discovery? Fast forward 10 years. And that's exactly what has happened. Today, the University of Michigan's North Campus Research Complex, or NCRC, now bustles with activity. More than 3,300 faculty, staff, and students work there every day, and thousands more come for events, training, or lectures. Every inch of space has a new purpose. 3 new centers and institutes and countless new collaborations have sprung into being thanks to NCRC. Scientific teams make discoveries on everything from heart disease, cancer, and health policy to advanced materials and futuristic automotive technology. Research services and shared research equipment give scientists access to knowledge and tools that accelerate discovery. Nearly 100 startup companies have launched from NCRC's incubator space. Thousands of patients who count on Michigan medicine for diagnosis and treatment have benefited from NCRC too, without ever setting foot there. A huge new clinical pathology facility provides precise answers to important questions about their health. The birth and growth of NCRC has been an experiment in expansion, one that has saved the university money and time. It all started with a what if. And now, thousands of researchers and clinicians are using it to create what ifs of their own.